thought I'd do a nice episode today about worry and anxiety. Why is it so bad? One of the things I love about Chinese medicine is that it understands that the emotions of the body are attached to your organs. We know what anxiety feels like. It then has physical symptoms that we can attach to it. The expression that we have in English, which is you'll worry yourself sick, is true. Because interestingly, in Chinese medicine, the emotion of worry is attached to the digestive system. The energy of worry goes round and round and round and round and round. Often when you're worrying, you can't find a solution, so you go round and round and round and round until eventually it just exhausts you because there's no conclusion, and you get tired and you get ill. Hello and welcome to Own Your Health with me, Katie Brindle. Do please rate and review this podcast on Apple and also on Spotify. And do, of course, please leave me your questions on Instagram, TikTok and YouTube because we love to hear from you. We are actually getting loads of really lovely comments from people. So I thought I'd read a few out just to kind of make a warm, fuzzy feeling before we start. So a lovely one here from Karswav, which is, I'm enjoying listening to these very much. There is so much useful information packed into these short episodes, which make small changes more achievable. And as we know, small changes are the ones that are more likely to stick. Very practical and easy to listen to. Thank you so much. Well, thank you. Hubba she said, I've followed Katie on Instagram for a few years now. Thank you, Hubba. I've seen you on loads of the lives, actually. I recognise your name. Katie is the one person I can rely on to make me feel calm, happy and energised. That's so nice. Thank you. These mini pods are like bite-sized bits of magic, so informative and full of wonderful Katie feel-good sparkle. I'm going to have to read these out to my husband, seriously. He'd go, is anyone going to stop this woman talking? That's what he'd say. He's not on social media though, so we're okay. Anyway, HLM70, thank you so much for this. I'm trying to recover from post-COVID syndrome and these meditations are really helping. I'm really glad they are. Having suffered from a slight bout of COVID myself quite recently, you have my full sympathy. So that is some really lovely intel just before we start the episode. And now we're going to go into the episode itself, which is all about worry and anxiety. I thought I'd do a nice episode today about emotional well-being because it is so common. We were talking about it just before we started to record and just go, why is it so bad? Why is it so prevalent? Has it always been this bad? Well, I think part of it is we talk about it more than we used to. I think the 20th century narrative was kind of pull yourself together and get on with it. And I do think sometimes as a 20th century born woman that sometimes I hear my husband speaking and actually he can be a bit like that. It's like, oh, for goodness sake, in our day, we just had to get on with it because life was incredibly hard. Now, we're not in kind of the early 20th century anymore. So therefore, life is a little bit softer in some respects for the future generations. And we are nonetheless transitioning out of a state of pain into a state of kindness and compassion and higher virtues. And that's the kind of moment in history that we're in right now. And as a result, we're talking more about our sensitivities. We're expressing more that we're unhappy about things and we're looking for solutions more. And we are in an age of information these days whereby we can find the solutions more easily. If I think perhaps back to my teenage years, if I was anxious about something, I wouldn't have gone to the doctor because that would have felt a bit of a strange thing to do. And I wouldn't have been able to find it online because that didn't exist. So you would have gone to the library and that would have been a bit sort of heavy. So probably I would have turned to my grandmother or something like that to sort of get some old wisdom as to what to do about my problem. Because normally the child-grandparent relationship will often offer you the kind of the wisdom of their years because often they would have been through something themselves. So if, say, I was anxious or concerned, she would probably be able to draw in that time on her experience in perhaps living as a single mother with a baby, with a husband fighting at war, wondering if he's ever going to come back, effectively on sort of a war salary. She would probably drawn on her own difficult experience, which probably under the circumstances would have made whatever my issue was go into context. That would have been the first thing. But we live now in this wonderful age of information and we can start to draw upon other cultural references and how they explain these emotional pains that we go through now. And what I love about Chinese medicine, and that's probably, I say that like 100 times a day when I come in here to record. I love Chinese medicine. Really? You don't say? Right, okay. So one of the things I love about Chinese medicine is that it understands that the emotions of the body are attached to your organs. And that is a really important piece of information. That is what we need to understand. If it goes back to my sort of 3 pillars of the pyramid of health, okay, you have your physical body, your emotional body, and your spiritual body. You also, to ensure that you're healthy, need to ensure that your blood and energy flow smoothly. You need to ensure that the body can purge and nourish effectively. And you need to ensure, above all, that you keep balanced and strong the key organs of the body. And we don't. And when it comes to our emotional health, all 3 of those factors are wobbling. The organs are not balanced. The blood flow is not balanced, and therefore the emotions which are housed in the blood, because it's all housed and controlled by the heart, and we call it the Shen in Chinese medicine, it flows in your circulatory process. If that circulation gets blocked because you're stressed, or you're sitting down for too long, or you're working too hard, or you're not exercising correctly, or you're not exercising at all, all of these things will start to go wrong. If your body isn't purging out negativity correctly, it gets stuck, and then you feel it. This is the thing about these fine frequencies that are not something that you can see. They're something that you feel, and boy, do you feel them. We know what anxiety feels like. It then has physical symptoms that we can attach to it. We also know what worry feels like. That also has physical symptoms. The expression that we have in English, which is you'll worry yourself sick, is true. Because interestingly, in Chinese medicine, the emotion of worry is attached to the digestive system. And indeed, the energy of worry goes round and round and round and round and round. Often when you're worrying, you can't find a solution. So you go round and round and round and round until eventually it just exhausts you because there's no conclusion. And you get tired and you get ill because you're compromising the aspect of the digestion, which is digesting your food. And the role of the digestive system in Chinese medicine is to transform and transport the food and fluids around the body. Well, that's energy production. And if that's becoming compromised because your mind is going round and round and round and round and round, ever trying to solve the problem, then you are going to make yourself feel sick. Absolutely. Now, anxiety is interesting in Chinese medicine. It's produced by the heart, but it also has a massive relationship with the organ of the spleen / the digestion, which is where worry sits as well. So anxiety and worry are very, very tightly linked in our medicine. It's just anxiety has a pathway into the spleen via the heart. And often you can attribute the symptoms of anxiety to the structure and the operating of the heart itself. Increased pulse, shortness of breath, sweats, heat, kind of that sort of fibrillating kind of energy frequency. That's all heart related. But what's happening and why it's such a common thing is because the heart feeds its energy into the spleen. Why is that? Because the heart attaches itself to the fire element. Fire burns. Now, in the olden days, when we all lived outside in woods, we would burn a fire outside and eventually it would burn and it would leave ash. And the ash would become the earth. And if we look at the generating cycle of energy that goes from fire, earth, metal, water, and wood, and the way that the energies create one another, the fire creates the earth energy. And if the earth is not capable of holding the fire in place, the fire starts to get nervous and it starts to kind of think, oh, I'm not held, and it starts to feel unstable. And one of the issues as to why anxiety is so common, aside from everything else I've said, is because what happens is that we are very unstable in the world that we live in now. It's not that the world wasn't unstable before. Arguably, there are many, many people that would say that the world very, very nearly came to an end in the 20th century. It very nearly did, but it didn't. But the thing about the difference between the world then and the world now is we know a lot more about it. We are living in this information age, and that's brilliant for so many reasons. The age of information is brilliant. It's giving this information to you now. It's what taught me this information in the first place. But often we are overwhelmed with the negative narrative, and it starts to make us doubt our security, our stability, the very root of the ground that we live in. And in the 21st century, we are also living in an environmental crisis like no other, because of the overpopulation, because of the overabuse of the world's resources. We all know about that. We've been brought up with the fact there was going to be an energy shortage, that we were going to run out, that there's not enough land to feed the world, and that everything's wrong. And that's narrated to us constantly. If you wish to tap into that narration, it's a constant narration. If you wish it to be a newsfeed, it's permanently there, making us feel unstable, because then we start to question our place in this earth. And it's very, very toxic. The other aspect to anxiety, and which leads into worry, is are lifestyles. One of the things that I say to people who suffer from anxiety is watch the first episode of Downton Abbey, okay? And now, I'm not saying it was fair, because that's a completely different social narrative, okay? But what I'm looking at is the aristocrats who basically had power and they had it going their way at that moment in time. Obviously, when you have power, you want your life to be as long as it can possibly be because you've got a good life. So why on earth would you want to shorten that life? You want to stretch it for as long as you can have it because it's great. You live in a huge, great house. You've got loads of people doing everything for you. You can wear nice clothes, eat good food, do what you like, and great. Okay, lucky you. So what they do, or what they did, is they had a very regular life. You will notice it from the first episode. They would be woken up. They didn't have to get themselves up, obviously. The maid came in and did that for them. So they'd just lie in bed. And in came some servant who would open the curtains for you at the same time every day. You would be fed your breakfast at the same time. You would be eating seasonal foods. You would be then exercising in the morning, which is adhering to the yang energy rising in the day. You would do your correspondence in the morning. You would read the paper in the morning. That would then be the end of the news feed. It would finish at that point when you are receptive to it. You would have been woken up, you would have got dressed, you would have been dressed, you would have read the paper, you would have digested that information at the right point in time. You would have then done some exercise. You would at this point now be ready to eat your lunch, which would have been served at the same time every single day. You would have pleasant conversation whilst you were eating. You would not be arguing because the posh people didn't do that. They had to do things correctly. Now, there may well be an army of people scuttling around downstairs making that happen, but the people who had power were living correctly. And that's what we need to observe. We don't need to decide whether we agree or disagree with what they were doing. It's how they were doing it that we need to take on board, because you compare that to our lives. And I'm just going to hypothesize here. In fact, let me give you my life, and I know what I'm doing. Do I wake up at the same time every day? No. Why? Well, because every single day is different. Do I eat my breakfast at the same time every day? No. Why? Well, because I have to make it myself. And that normally is in relationship to every single other person in my house. And that depends on what they're doing. And it also depends on what I'm doing. And then sometimes I have to get flights or trains or drive somewhere or get somewhere. And I'm probably describing your life too. Then I skip lunch because I haven't got time to eat, because I'm on the hoof doing something else. So I grab a coffee or grab a sandwich. And then my body doesn't know what it's supposed to be eating. And then it's the wrong food. And then I do something completely different today to what I was doing yesterday and what I'm doing tomorrow. So, and then that doesn't include travel, whereby nowadays, because of the amazing invention of the aeroplane, whereby now we can get on a flight and we can end up in a completely different place in a matter of a couple of hours, in a totally different culture, totally different food, totally different energy frequencies. And if you do long distance traveling, you're in a completely different time zone, and your poor body is absolutely buffered from pillar to post in terms of what it's doing from 1 second to the next. And there's never any stability to this compass. The only stability is it's unstable. And what that does is it starts to create a state of fight or flight, because the body is always on guard, wondering what's going to happen next, because there's no routine. And the animal that we should observe for honouring our stability in our earth and to understand our anxiety is the dog. Dogs absolutely connect humans to nature. And if anyone's got a dog, you will notice that your dog doesn't have a watch and yet has an absolute inbuilt body clock about what you should be doing every day. And dogs love routine. They are their happiest when they do the same thing at the same time every day. Breakfast, walkies, cuddles, sofa, TV in the evening, whatever it is that your dog does. So I've just described my dog's life. Really, like, I am so coming back as my dog. Okay, my dog, unlike me, my dog has this great life. Okay, so, and it knows the days it goes to the dog minders, when it goes off to Trevor, and it has a really fun time with its doggy friends, and it has the best life because we've thought about it. And we as humans ultimately need to be doing the same thing, and we don't. So we need to observe dogs and think we need to try as much as we can when we're dealing with anxiety to give ourselves regularity, okay, of what we are doing. Because the heart is very much about the fire and about yang is about daytime and action and accomplishments and getting things done and leading. And we need to ensure that in our busy diaries and in our busy days that we are thinking about ourselves. We're not just thinking about our jobs and our families and everyone around us. We're thinking, when am I eating? When am I sleeping? When am I relaxing? When am I having some downtime? When am I got some me time? And interestingly, even though I talk about this so much, I find equally myself, I get caught up in the narrative just as easily if I'm not careful. So if you're feeling stressed or anxious or overwhelmed and life is basically getting on top of you, then I've got a really good little product. It's called Stay Calm by Dr. Vegan. This unique blend combines the natural power of adaptogenic botanicals like ashwagandha, KSM66 and rhodiola, along with essential minerals. 81% of people who have tried Stay Calm report that it effectively helps them handle stress and anxiety, making them feel less overwhelmed and more in control. It's designed to help your body maintain a natural balance while boosting energy and focus. All you have to do is go to drvegan.com and you will receive 25% off your first order if you put in the code BRINDLE25. Earlier on this year, I went on this diet plan, not specifically to lose weight necessarily, but just to sort of try it because it was really healthy. And the thing that I found the hardest about it wasn't actually the food, which I really liked. It was the fact that I had to eat every 5 hours. It was an absolute nightmare of organisation. It was ridiculous. It was that difficult. And it made me very aware of how elastic I was with my eating patterns because I had to be. And I kind of used to just treat that as just being a busy mum with a job. It was like, well, you know, my breakfast is here and my lunch is there and maybe it doesn't happen and then I'll have it later and it all went wrong. And it was really important. So when you're managing your diary, to ensure that you put your meal times into your diary. When are you having your breakfast, lunch and dinner? When are you having a rest? And that you're really taking into account these things. And you will find that before you even start with any specific activities for managing anxiety, that will make a massive difference. If you then layer, last but by absolute no means least, into everything I've just explained, social media. Now, I know I'm coming at you via social media, so obviously, like, I'm not saying give it up because this is all great, so please. But please follow and rate and review me on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and comment on your questions below. No, but the thing is, social media has two things that it really does to make everything worse. First of all, it is kind of, if you're not following the right information, if you're not doing things that are taking you to a better place and you're just sort of mindlessly scrolling through other people doing things, it can often make you feel very insecure about what you're doing and who you are. Because social media has been designed really to kind of go, ta-da, here's me looking fabulous, having a really great time doing this amazing thing with my kids, okay, or with my dog, or with myself, or whatever it is. And often then that immediately makes you think, Oh, I didn't go blackberry picking. I remember this was in autumn. I got caught out myself. A really lovely friend of mine who I follow on social media, and I really like her. She'd gone blackberry picking with her kids that afternoon. Now, unbeknown to her, I'd had an absolute shit show of a brindle afternoon that afternoon when my kids were fighting and they were hammer and tong upstairs and Mr. Brindle and I weren't having a great time. And I think the dog had weed on the carpet and basically the whole thing had basically derailed. Now, pre-social media, you would have just contained that to just go, okay, it's just a bad day of family life and it's all fine and we're all having a big hug at the end of the day and everything's good. And then off I went to my social media to see that my friend had gone blackberry picking with her children. Like, oh my God, I should be doing things like that with my kids. I thought, there you go. That's what it does. It heightens, and she'd probably not mentioned that she'd probably had a massive argument with her kids, but that bit doesn't make the Instagram, does it? No, that bit doesn't. It's the happy family photo. So it gives you a snapshot, which is often not true. It's just what people want you to see. And as I like to say to people in my clinic, how things seem and how things are is not the same thing. And in this world of social media, often that gets flipped. And then we start to believe that how things seem is indeed the truth. And often it's not. But if you're scrolling through 100 feeds and looking at how things seem and they're not really true, and you're meanwhile experiencing how things are, that's going to make you feel a bit rubbish about yourself. What does that do? It impacts the heart. It impacts the shen. It impacts your stability about your place on this earth, which immediately starts to create drip feed poison into the system and starting to create symptoms of anxiety and instability and concern. So it's really important with social media to be really discerning about what you're doing, who you're following, why you're following them, and above all, when you're looking. And I would urge everybody listening or watching this podcast, please do not do this last thing at night. Everyone's looking at the floor because everybody looks at their socials before they go to sleep. Nobody should be looking at any devices for at least an hour before they go to bed because it's really bad for the liver and that's really bad for your sleep. That's on another podcast about sleep. But it's also really bad for you to be scrolling at a rate of knots at what other people are up to just before you go to sleep at night. The time to do that is in the heart time of day, which is between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m, because that is fire time of day, when it's like lunchtime. It's social. In the old days, you go for lunch and have a chit chat with colleagues and things like that. So now you can chit chat online instead. And in pericardium time in the evening, which is between 7 and 9. And you're allowed to do it then. But then you need to shut it down. Because at that point then, we need to start developing our inner eye. Okay, we need to be developing our internal narrative, not constantly looking what everyone else is doing. We need to start gazing in at ourselves and thinking about us and cultivating and developing yourself, your inner state, which doesn't come from seeking it from the outside. This information of who you are and why you're the way you are and why you're doing what you're doing, which is the key to why you would be feeling anxious and worried in the first place, is inside. It's held in the DNA strands in your cells. It's been coded via your ancestors from generation to generation to generation, passed down from line by line, from mother to mother to mother. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people involved in the production of your life, all coded in your DNA. And if you're busy looking at everything else on the outside and being distracted, going, oh, look at this and look at that. Oh, this person's doing, oh, I'm not doing that. Ooh. And that negative narrative, what it does is it will drown out entirely the divine dialogue, which is inside yourself. And that divine dialogue is the key to what I call your inner chamber. And that is the key to your happiness, because ultimately your happiness is what you deserve to feel, like doggies on this earth. Dogs are born happy. I mean, obviously, there's some have horrendous lives. But if you look at any privileged dog that's having a great time, they are just so happy to be alive. Life's just great. They're great because they're connected to the earth and they're connected to their life, and they understand how to work with the most superior medium, which will transcend all negative frequencies, unconditional love, which is what this is all about. So there is a good explanation for that. Now, worry is basically, as I said, very much connected to the spleen and the digestive energy. And in that state, what's happening is that all the instability that I've been talking about hits the spleen. Now, some people feel anxious, some people feel worried, some people feel both. Okay, some people need anger management. Okay, some people are frightened. And some people just can't let go of things. And who you are and why you're the way, which one's going to dominate, is going to be connected to what I've explained in another episode about your Bazi. Now, that is fully explained in that episode, so I won't dwell on that in this one. But just to say that whatever the day master is in your body, followed by the year animal, is going to unlock the reasons as to why you are more likely to be getting off balance in one emotional state rather than another. It's normally connected to the way that your energy and the way that your body has been formed in the first place. So you will normally have a kind of go-to emotional symptom that will be your defining one, whether it's anxious or worry or fear, whichever one it is. And it will be connected to your Bazi. Now, in the meantime, here are some really, really simple things that you can do, aside from regulating your diaries, only looking at social media in a positive way and not following anything that's anything negative at all, and doing it at the right time of day. So, for example, one of the easiest things that you can do to offset worry and anxiety is to hold your thumb. So cool. Okay, this is why children suck their thumbs, because by holding your thumb, you're comforting the body. Okay, you're comforting the spleen channel of the body and you're allowing it to feel stable. It's the most amazing thing. And it's why instinctively babies and little ones suck their thumbs. That's why they do it. Instinctively, no one's taught them to, they just do it because it's comforting. So it's a really useful thing. If you're finding that things are getting on top of you, or you're nervous or you're worried, just holding your thumb is really, really useful. There is also a really lovely thing, which are these Celtic worry stones you can buy. Now, they're a little crystal, and you can buy them online. They're really cheap, and they've got a little indentation for your thumbprint, and it works on the same thing, that by pushing your thumb into the crystal, you're nurturing your spleen. So it's the same kind of concept as holding your thumb. There are a few other really simple things that you can do, and one of the most important things for anyone with any kind of emotional situation going on is to get into nature. Something that I haven't really talked about, along with the whole Downton Abbey thing, was the industrialization of society has taken us from being land-dwelling creatures. Now, I'm not saying if it was right or wrong. I'm just saying it's moved us out of our natural landscape into urban living. Many people live in urban living. So we're living in flats. Our feet are not even on the ground. We are whizzing through life in cars going at 70 miles an hour rather than walking or on horseback, where things would go much more slowly. And we are not living with the seasons. We're not foraging for our food. We've just removed ourselves from that. We just go to supermarkets now and sort of buy a ready meal and stick it in the microwave and eat it. That is a long way away from how humans have originated. And ultimately, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying that by doing that, you are further removing yourself from the natural process. And your body is natural. And bodies love being in nature. And you will find, no matter what state you're in, if you can get yourself into a park or into an open space, you are likely to feel better. Exercising the body is such an important thing for our mental health. So getting into nature is a really, really important thing to do. And if you can't, because you don't live near nature, it's about heightening it in other ways. For example, bring in lots of houseplants. Have loads of houseplants inside the house. Really think about how you design your house to have maximum houseplants everywhere they can be. If you're in an office space, make sure there's loads of houseplants around you in the office as well. Try and do a walk to work or back from work that goes through a park. Or if nothing else, just linger in the old pavement tree. If there's one poor little tree on your pavement, like sort of cemented into the ground, stand by that tree, give it a hug. I mean, tree hugging is really, really useful because you feel the energy and the force of the tree, and it will really, really help you. The other thing is really useful is to make a plan. Making a plan is very, very good at, first of all, feeding the fire and also controlling the earth. So by having a plan of action will really help you. Not just a plan, but a routine. I've talked about routines already. It's very important to plan your routine and to think ahead of the day that's coming next. If your routine is really erratic, before you go to bed at night, just make sure you've gone through your diary and gone, okay, body, this is what we're doing tomorrow. It's going to be a bit different from today, but what we are going to do is have our breakfast, we're going to have our lunch, we're going to have our dinner, we're going to try and have a rest in the middle of the afternoon, and that we're going to try as much as we can to create that regularity of lifestyle and plan that into your day. And then finally, try and focus your mind on other things in your hobbies. So rather than scrolling through social media, is trying to create other hobbies which nurture positive energy in the body. And so it's a very important thing, because the problem with social media is it's a bit like a kind of tub of Pringles. It can be quite addictive and you're never satisfied. So you kind of eventually just give up because you either get tired or you're just exhausted or you're feeling negative. It's not sort of satisfied something because it's not nurturing enough. It's too, the thought waves are too short. So one of the things to do is to practice elongating your thought waves so that you can give yourself patience and time on something which you enjoy cultivating, which is constructive. You are energy creating at this point rather than energy consuming, which is what social media does. Social media consumes our energy, and that starts to make us feel weak and worried and anxious, whereas creating energy makes you feel strong and empowered. So things like gardening, even if you live in a flat, just have some window boxes, have some little plants in your kitchen, have bonsai trees. Bonsai trees are really, really good spiritual practice because you need to fiddle with them every day. I've got bonsai trees. I love them. They're Chinese, of course. Basically, bonsai tree cultivation is really addictive. It's really interesting. Even things like making crafts, knitting, sewing, old-fashioned things that people used to do. There's a big resurgence of this now amongst the younger generations. People no longer going out and getting drunk on a Friday night in London. I saw this brilliant article about it on ITV. And they're now doing pottery classes instead and doing kind of constructive things to offset the way that their lives are. And actually, they are absolutely right. It's much healthier to go and do a pottery class or cooking class on a Friday night. And then also things like flower arranging is also really good. Just buying a bunch of flowers and just making them look lovely in a vase and engaging with what you're doing. And if all of that sounds a bit weird and you think, oh, I'm not doing any of that, then the last thing that you could do, which is really good, and I know this sounds crazy, colouring in. Colouring in, preferably mandalas. You can get whole colouring in books with mandalas. They are so therapeutic, and anyone can do it. And it takes you back to a childhood state. I'd kind of forgotten about colouring in until I had small kids myself. And then some of the things I have to do with my small kids back in the day, I think, I don't really want to do that. But colouring in, I used to really enjoy it. I was like, I'll get really focused and concentrate. Get your pens out and you focus on the lines. It is really good for you. Very, very useful advice. And it's also very relaxing. And last but by no means least on all of this is, please, if you can possibly put your phones down and stop scrolling before bed, pick up a book. Reading is one of the most therapeutic things that you can do that will allow you to go into your inner state and really develop and cultivate your energy frequencies and help to offset any issues of anxiety and worry. So thank you all so much for joining me in this episode. It's a big topic. I'm very sure that many of you will want to ask more questions from this. So please do put your comments below if you're on TikTok, Instagram or YouTube. And do please tell people about this episode, because mental health is such a huge topic and people really need this information. So it's a really important one. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next time.